And the setting of our lesson, the story takes place during Israel's oppression by Jabin, the king of Canaan. Israel had once again, which we joke about, but we're so like them, done evil in the sight of the Lord, and that's in Judges 4:1. And the Lord sold them into the land of Jabin in verse 2. And then for 20 years, Jabin mightily oppressed the children of Israel. And the story goes on in chapter 4 to tell us that this was the time that Deborah, a prophetess, judged Israel. So we're going to turn to Judges chapter 4. But Deborah is not our focus today. I mean, Deborah is definitely an interesting, as a prophetess and judging Israel as a woman, that's a whole lesson in itself, pretty neat. But she's not our focus today. So we're going to look at Judges chapter 4, verses 5 to 17a, and I'll read that. And, I'll start at 4. And Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, she judged Israel at that time, which we just said. Verse 5, and she dwelt under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel and Mount Ephraim. And the children of Israel came up to her for judgment. And she sent and called Barak, the son of Abinoam, out of Kadesh Naphtali, and said unto him, hath not the Lord God of Israel commanded, saying, go and draw toward Mount Tabor, and take with thee 10,000 men of the children of Naphtali, and of the children of Zebulun? And I will draw unto thee to the river Kishon Sisera, who is the captain of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his multitude, and I will deliver him into thine hand. Verse 8, and Barak said unto her, if thou wilt go with me, then I will go. But if thou wilt not go with me, then I will not go. This is very interesting to me. That's a man saying that to a woman. Well, if you'll go with me, then I'll go, And he's a commander in the army. And verse 9, and she said, I will surely go with thee, notwithstanding the journey that thou takest shall not be for thine honor. For the Lord shall sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. And Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kadesh. And Barak called Zebulun and Naphtali to Kadesh. And he went up with 10,000 men at his feet, and Deborah went with him. Now Heber the Kenite, which was of the children of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses, had severed himself from the Kenites and pitched his tent unto the plain of Zanaim, which is by Kadesh. Verse 12, and they showed Sisera that Barak, the son of Abinoam, was gone up to Mount Tabor. Verse 13, and Sisera gathered together all his chariots, even 900 chariots of iron, and all the people that were with him, from Harosheth of the Gentiles unto the river Kishon. Verse 14, and Deborah said unto Barak, up, for this is the day in which the Lord hath delivered Sisera into thine hand. Is not the Lord gone out before thee? So Barak went down from Mount Tabor, and 10,000 men after him. Verse 15, and the Lord discomfited Sisera and all his chariots and all his host with the edge of the sword before Barak, so that Sisera lighted down off his chariot and fled away on his feet. But Barak pursued after the chariots and after the host unto Harosheth of the Gentiles, and all the host of Sisera fell upon the edge of the sword, and there was not a man left. Verse 17, just the first part, howbeit Sisera fled away on his feet to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. And we're going to stop right there for a minute. I mean, just a wild story to me. I just think that this is, amazing. So first I want us to take note that before the battle, Deborah told Barak, which is a commander in the army, in the Israel army, and said, she told him something unusual in verse 9, the Lord shall sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. Okay, so Sisera was the commander. I have that wrong. That says Sisera was the commander of Israel. He was not not. Sisera was the commander of Canaan, in Canaan.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so you got to change that. So Barak likely thought that Deborah was going to be that woman. I mean, when Deborah said unto him that Sisera, the Lord shall sell Sisera into the hand of a woman, he thought, oh, well, capable Deborah here who leads us, who, she's the prophetess, she's going to be the one. She's just telling about herself without saying her name. But actually, that wasn't the case. Let's look at the rest of verse 17. I'll just start at the beginning. Howbeit Sisera fled away on his feet to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. For there was peace between Jabin, the king of Hazor, and the house of Heber the Kenite. So there was some type of relationship there that Sisera thought, oh, I'm going to go into Jael's husband, to his tent, and I'm going to be safe there. And so that, if we look at verse 18 to 22, it says, and Jael went out to meet Sisera and said unto him, this story is just wild to me. Jael went out to meet Sisera and said unto him, turn in, my lord, turn in to me, fear not. And when he had turned in unto her into the tent, she covered him with a mantle. Well, isn't she just the hostess with the mostess? Okay? And verse 19, and he said unto her, give me, I pray thee, a little water to drink, for I'm thirsty. And she opened a bottle of milk and gave him drink and covered him. Verse 20, again he said unto her, stand in the door of the tent, and it shall be, when any man doth come and inquire of thee, and say, is there any man here? Thou shalt say, no. Then verse 21, then Jael, Heber's wife, took a nail of the tent and took a hammer in her hand, because he was feeling so safe. You stand in the door. You stand in the door and you watch, because I'm zonked. I mean, I had to get off my horse and run here, and everybody else is dead, and I have got to get a few shut-eye here. So I feel very, very, obviously very safe with you. You stand in the door and watch. And if anyone asks if any man came in here, you just say no, and I'll keep on sleeping. Bad move. So she took a hammer in her hand and went softly on him and smote the nail into his temples and fastened it to the ground. Okay, we're not talking a little carpentry nail or anything like that. Yeah, this is, and fastened it onto the ground. Okay, somebody's head is like this thick if they're laying on their side, so think of it that way. For he was fast asleep. Man, was that guy fast asleep. He was out for the count and weary. So he died.
So he died.
So he died. That's what it says. Verse 22, and behold, as Barak pursued Sisera, Jael came out to meet him and said unto him, come, I will show thee the man whom thou seekest. He was not expecting this. And when he came into the tent, behold, Sisera lay dead, and the nail was in his temples. I'm just like amazed, like, wow. Here we see what seems to be an ordinary woman do something absolutely extraordinary. I think to myself, could I do that? Well, let's talk a little bit about a few of the highlights of this passage. And I mean, I know it's serious, but wow, yes, it is just, it's a really, really neat, true story. But let's look at a few highlights of the passage. The first one I want to focus on is that Jael was faithfully serving in her place. Verse 17, howbeit Sisera fled away on his feet to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, for there was peace between Jabin the king of Hazor and the house of Heber the Kenite. So there's the connection there, was the two kings, not necessarily Sisera and Jael's husband, but the two kings there. So he thought he was safe. You shouldn't assume things. But so here she was. In this culture, Jael was doing what the women did. She was caring for the household and the tent. And neat fact is, in this day and age and culture, the women mostly did all the tent setting up. So that what do they call it? The nail of the tent. I call it a stake. That's what it reminds me more of, is a stake rather than a nail. But to use Bible terminology, the nail of the tent, she was familiar with it. She was familiar with that and the hammer. She used it, and apparently she's pretty skillful with it too, you know. So, but she was in her home, because that was her home for right then, in her household and her tent, and that's where God used her. That ordinary place is where God used her. And God led Sisera, the commander of the other army, right to her. You know, she didn't have to go scouting for something to do. She was just doing what she was supposed to be doing. And God brought along an opportunity to her because she was already being faithful in what she was supposed to be doing. Let's go to 1 Corinthians 15:58. 1 Corinthians 15:58. Are you like me and you play out like these things in your mind, these stories?
Yes.
I have this vision of Jael being this beautiful, strong, mid-age woman, you know, that you would never expect. Stand in the door there and watch, and I'll sleep here. I mean, he thought nothing of it. So, you know, if she was kind of like you know, he might think twice. But that's why I was like, I think she was very beautiful, sweet, you know, just looked like a keeper at home and nothing to fear. So stand in the door while I get some winks. And 1 Corinthians 15:58, who would like to read that real loud? Okay. Lovely. Go ahead, Tanya.
Therefore, my beloved brethren, be ye steadfast, unmovable always, abounding in the work of the Lord, for as much as you know that your labor is not in vain in the Lord.
Thank you, Tanya. I'm going to take a drink. So we're talking about be faithful in what God has tasked you with. If he wants more from you, you don't have to go seeking it. God will task you with it. Some people go seeking, you know, the harder things because they think that's where the glory is too. And that's definitely not. Start with the basics and be faithful in the basics. Be faithful to God in your relationship. That is the number one, uno, numero. Be faithful to God every day in walking with him and talking with him and having a relationship that's real. Not just saying I'm a Christian, but being, you know, actually being a follower of Christ. And God has tasked you with your home and your family, and the dynamics of everybody's family looks a little bit different, okay? But it doesn't matter. Your relationship with Christ first, and then the family and household that God has given you. I think of Miss Peggy. You have grandkids and kids in and out all the time. Same with you, Tanya, all the time. And then Carol, same. You've got, you know, still, you say Eric's over here, you know, that you've got all kinds of people in and out. Those are our sphere of influence and who we care for and who God has tasked us with, okay? First your relationship with him and then them. Be faithful in it. Be faithful to God in front of them, okay? Be faithful to take care of them in the best ways that you can. Like I was thinking to myself, I brought, Weston just loves to have boxed apple juice. So I buy the little organic apple juice and have it up in my cupboard for him because it's something he doesn't get at home. I didn't buy that for my kids when they were growing up. Man, I bought a thing of apple juice and you got some out of there and I diluted it with water at that. You know, so cheap. So this is just something, you know, but we care for the ones we love. But the best way that we can care for the ones we love is to have our life be pointing to Christ. Every chance, every opportunity, all the time. If we mess up once, I'll give you an example, if I can. Okay, so there's someone I'm trying to be supportive of. And so I do things to show that support. But when my support shows approval on something that I'm spiritually not aligned with or agreed with, I have to step back. Okay? And I have to be faithful to what God has laid on my heart that are my standards. Okay? And that cannot always be easy, but I have to be true to God. Okay? That's what I'm saying, is be true to God. Be true to God no matter the cost. God will take care of everything else in place, and we do more damage when we compromise and we think we are helping family and friends. We think we're being supportive. We think this, we think that. Stop thinking. God's done our thinking for us. Just obey. I used to tell the kids that. Your only job is to obey. It's all, right now, just obey. That's it. You'll have harder stuff later. But just be faithful in what God has tasked you with. Be faithful every single time. One decision at a time. One decision at a time. Be in your realm and be faithful in it. Be found faithful. Jael was faithfully serving in her place. And then if God wants something big from you, like that, then he'll enable you to do it. But you know what? If she wasn't faithfully home taking care of her place and doing what she was supposed to be, or maybe even, maybe she gave her husband a hard time and didn't take care of the tent and said, no, that's something you're going to do. Women weren't quite as sassy as they are back then. They just weren't. It doesn't. That culture didn't stand for it. But let's say if she had, and so she didn't know how to use that, So, but she was found faithful, serving in her place. Next thing I'd like to look at is Jael was courageous. I don't think anybody's going to dispute this fact. Jael was courageous. Jael saw the cause. Okay? Israel was at war, and the enemy is fleeing, and all of a sudden, the enemy is in her tent. Wow. So Jael saw the cause, and she saw an opportunity to stop a dangerous enemy. This was really big, and I think, 2020? Is that the big COVID year? Faith over fear.
Yeah.
Okay? And it's a great saying. Yeah. Faith over fear. That's what Jael had to have. I wonder what she thought when he slipped into her tent. And he thought there was some connection there that was going to keep him safe. But she had to have tremendous courage and say, stop and think very quickly. Okay? He's going, he's fallen asleep. He's the enemy. He is not a friend to Israel. He is the enemy here. I have an opportunity. He's asleep, and God just told her right what to do, and she obeyed. But that took courage. I was thinking to myself, what if he woke up like when you're trying to position the stake over his temple, what would happen then? Well, but it just took courage, or that it wouldn't quite go in correctly, So she had to have courage to do this. This was an act of courage. And as Christian women, we must show courage by standing for truth, by defending right, by speaking up when needed, and not compromising. Let's go to Joshua 1:9. Joshua 1:9. Let me get there, and then you can read that, Miss Carol. Okay, go ahead.
Have not I commanded thee? Be strong and of good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed. For the Lord thy God is with thee, whithersoever thou goest.
She had to really be thinking this. Thank you, Carol. She had to really be thinking about the fact that God was in this, because if she didn't think that, if she really didn't have that kind of faith, then her fear would have stopped her. I know it would have me, just thinking of how things could have played out, or what could have happened as this was happening. But she didn't. She had faith over fear, and God was with her. And we really need to be courageous. We may never be called upon to do something like this. Lord, I hope not. I just don't know if I have it in me. But I do know that God gives you whatever you need.
Yeah.
He gave it to her, and it was a huge victory. Because remember, when Barak went by, she's like, oh, come here, got to show you something,
Yeah.
And he's like thinking to himself, well, that was the woman, not Deborah. Deborah wasn't the one who was going to be the one, that she had prophesied about. It was actually Jael. So very, very neat. But we need to have courage. Think of times in your life where you've had to have courage from the Lord, where you were going to do something that had to have courage. Sometimes it feels like that's just getting out of bed. That's the reality of it, is sometimes that feels like it takes courage. And it does. And just remember that the Lord, according to that verse, Joshua 1:9, the Lord is with us. Okay? I told you about how I told Weston, when you wake up in the night and you're scared because the trains are really loud by our house, and sometimes that wakes him up, and then I know, sometimes he wakes up anyway, just scared because he's a kid. I said, I want you to remember, God is with you, and I've applied that to my own life as I wake up through the night, especially when I hear the train, but even at other times, but always when I hear the train and I'm awake, and I pray right then and say, God, help that little boy to remember that you're with him. He's over a couple rooms over. And I tell him that. I say, when you hear the train, a lot of times, Mum is over. Remember where I live? And he'll point over to the wall. I said, Mum is over there in her bed praying for you. And just remember, God is with us. And God's with you and will take care of you. We've got to remember that too. God is with us as we go through things that are hard and that require courage on our part. The uncourageous thing makes me think of that lion in The Wizard of Oz, That's me. That's me sometimes, and I just want to go and go pull the blankets over my head. But it takes courage and understanding that God is with me, and He will give me exactly what I need to face whatever the day holds. And my job is just to be faithful in my place and to have faith over fear. And that's what Jael did. But we need to defend right. Just like the instance I just told you about, without giving too many details. I have to stand for truth sometimes. Sometimes that's what the circumstances the situation calls for, is to take an uncomfortable stand, when really I just want to do the blanket thing. Pull it over my head. I don't see anything, but really I do, and God taps my heart and says, time, take a stand, Julie. Be courageous, I'm with you. Just take a stand. And we have to do that. And maybe it's a family reunion, or maybe it's you're with somebody and they're using the Lord's name in vain. I'm just giving small examples. I don't know what just think of a time in your life where you have to draw on the Lord to have that courage and say, okay, I'm going to take a stand for right. don't really want to. I want to, but I don't want to because I just would rather pull the blanket over my head. But God says, no, be courageous. It's time to be courageous. And Jael, she was courageous. Faith over fear. And then lastly, Jael, the unlikely assassin, she used what was in her hand. She used what was in her hand. Verse 21, who has that? Because I'm gone from there. Sorry, I didn't mean to be gone from there. Judges 4:21.
Oh, I have it.
Go ahead, Tanya.
Then Jael Heber's wife took a nail of the tent, and took an hammer of her hand, and went softly unto him, and smote the nail into his temples, and fastened it into the ground. For he was fast asleep and weary, so he died.
So he died. Thank you. She used what was in her hand, a tent peg and a hammer. That's it. She didn't have guns I'm sure they didn't have probably guns. Whatever weaponry that they had back then, swords, yeah, and arrows, fiery arrows and shields and all that. She didn't have that. She used what she was already familiar with, what she already had. And then I put in there again, women in this day and culture were usually ones to put up the tents. So God often uses things that we already have to do something great if we're yielded to Him. Okay? You may look at your talents, your home, your spiritual gifts, your influence, and say, I don't have anything here that could smote the temple and kill the enemy. Well, you actually don't know that, because if God decides to use you because you're faithfully where you should be, you're being courageous, and He decides to use you, He's going to give you the tools, and it'll likely be something that's right there. Think of your talents, and then using our home and spiritual gifts and our time and our influence. We take these things for granted and say they're not a big deal, but yet, what more could we give to God than basically our life? And just say, okay, God, you see everything about me, everything I am. You know what my gifts are. You know what my talents are. You know what tools I have. Okay, use me. I'm yielded to you if you want to use me. And then it takes, because Jael was in that tent, and she was in there, and when the moment came, she had courage. But you don't have courage at the last minute, like all of a sudden you draw on it. You have to be walking with God. That's something that's got to be in place so that when you need it, when you need Him to give you the courage, He's as close as the mention of His name. Not like, God, where are you? Because we've strayed so far from Him. She faithfully served in her place. She was courageous, and she used what was in her hand. God used that because she had already yielded to Him, and she was ready. And when the moment called for it, there she was. That's what I want to be. When God calls, I want to be walking so close to God that I continue to be faithful in where He has put me. And that's my home, that's Solid Rock Baptist Church, that's my group of friends. And I also want to be courageous, because the thought of that scares the fire out of me. But there's a lot of things that scare the fire out of me that I know when rubber meets road, God will give me exactly what I need to face it. Peggy has found that. Carol has found that. Tanya has found that. Tiff has found that. Donna has found that. Just all different ways. But God gives us exactly what we need when we're yielded to Him and walking close to Him. I cannot overemphasize having that walk with God all the time. Not the last second when our life is falling apart and we can't figure things out. Yes, God is right there, but the strength that you receive immediately when you're already walking close to Him and you call out His name. I remember when Laura and the kids were, Laura and Ed and the family, they were here one year when we lived in the house on 179, and the red roof house. And Lee was like 2, if that. I think Landon was a baby. And they were up above the garage, because that had gotten redone, and somehow Lee came down by himself. And it was a carpeted stair, and all of a sudden we heard it. Mom and I and a bunch of us were in the living room, and we heard him start to fall. And my mom yelled out, "Jesus, that's it." And went to the steps, and there was not one thing wrong with that boy. He wasn't hurt at all. He fell from the top. And I just have thought about that so many. That's being as close as the mention of his name. And she knew, she didn't call out, "Lay," she called out to the one who can make a difference.
Yes, amen.
And what an example that has been to me through my life. So be faithful to God, and He will use you in ways never, ever imagined, just like He did JL. What an incredible story. What an unlikely assassin. But God uses those that are yielded to Him, and we have no idea what that may look like. She didn't. But what a great example to us. Thank you to our online friends.
With all the